Any questions? I guess the picture tells the story, maybe, huh? It was good talks. Oh, here we got some questions. Okay.
I was thinking about Miller and Lawrence as painters of a certain kind, right? And I wondered if you have any thoughts on the connection between these literary figures. They're even, actually to the class point as well, because Lawrence is always often considered somewhat outside of modernism, being the wrong side of the tracks. So if that's a question to both of you in a sense, the idea of Miller as a painter, Lawrence as a painter, how these relate to their crisis of self, and any sense of how their technique or lack of it relates to a sense of painting, class, and imagery.
Very good. I've got ideas about some of those things. I may have ideas about the others after I meditated on it. Right, some of those things. I mean, there's a piece that Miller writes where he says something along the lines of when he hangs out with artists, he realizes they can all cook too, right? And that a person who makes things and thinks things often doesn't just channel it into that one channel, right? That especially painters write and think and walk and talk. And I'm a little wary of the fetishization by the Academy of someone who paints as a painter, rather than this making things as part of what it means to be a human who's alive, who's trying to negotiate emotions and sort of being almost. So there's that, but I think for me it's much more in the round. But they did exchange their paintings, didn't they? There's a wonderful essay by Durrell at the start of To Paint Is to Love Again, where Durrell says, look, we had to be amateurs because we were hanging out with Picasso. So if you're in Paris in the 30s and you're not going to reach that bar. So it almost like at that point it has to be play. And then of course I think play becomes this principle, this resistance, right? If the world is grueling, then you play, right? And that play is important. Play is the means of getting at the thing. Class, I don't know, I'm still thinking through Miller in Class. I mean, I keep thinking about him in the Cosmodemonic Telegraph Company actually being middle management, like the dude with 3 telephones. And thinking about Miller going to Paris in poverty is actually a really interesting class move because of the difference between those two ones. So, Caroline, I've gone on too long. Tell me about class.
No, I'm not going to tell you about class. I feel like I'm a bit short here. Here we go. I'm starting to realize that he must have read that his finger was more on the pulse of what was happening within a wider photographic landscape in the 1930s. So initially, when I wrote about him a while ago, I think I was quite focused on the relationship between him and Brassai because it's so there. But I think that they were reading other people writing about photography. I think they really were aware of this. And I think in terms of his sort of fascination with Brassai, I think at a very practical level, I think he felt that together they gained access. Somehow there was an element of sort of it's okay to be hanging about these brothels because you're there for a certain purpose, and so on and so on. I know that when I tried to get permission to use Brassai's images in my book, the widow of Brassai was still alive, and she was absolutely not happy about anything to do with Miller. So she must have felt that they were engaged in something that was that she didn't want to think about or remember. But that doesn't really attend to the issue of class. I think that there's something about street photography at the time that we no longer have, which I find quite interesting. So that's part of a much wider discourse, which is that sense that they could go out and just photograph people without going through a lengthy process of permission. So the whole idea of the distribution of images, the purpose of taking them, where they would end up, all of these things were so different that it's thus also becomes a fundamentally different exercise. I mean, now you couldn't do that. If you did do it, you'd get into a whole bunch of trouble, which might be as it should be. I don't know about that.
Okay, I've got a question for Sarah. First, let me wish you good luck on the raffle, because clearly you need one of those Japanese watercolor books, without a doubt. So good luck. We'll see what happens later today. Second, I'm going to make a bold statement that might ruffle some feathers, but I like doing that because I'm from New Jersey. I think Henry Miller's watercolors have been, in my opinion, more widely accepted outside of the United States than inside. And I'm going to go to Japan for this with Kubo Satajiro. And one of the things that he wrote about, so if you're looking for stuff, of course it's locked in the Japanese language. But one of the things that he loved about Miller and that he went to Miller for was the childlike aspect of his paintings. Kubo actually was a huge promoter of child education through art in Japan, and he felt that that was one of Miller's strong points. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. We tend to maybe, the term childlike might be demeaning in some sense, but I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
I mean, I used to teach a lovely course called Americans in Paris, right? And there was a wonderful piece in the, oh Lord, it's gone. The Malcolm Cowley book, Exile's Return, where he talks about part of what was in the air in 1922 to sort of 35 when Americans went and lived in Paris was this idea of sanctification by the child, that we no longer know how to live. Modernity's ruined us all, even as early as 1922, and the child is the figure that can show us how to get back there, and you can see this is part of Miller's relationship with Whitman. So there's this very kind of well-used modernist trope, the child and the painting of the person in the asylum as well. I think the reason they seem childlike, interestingly, and this was the chat I had with my lovely art teacher, is he often uses tetradic colour, right? So if you go through a conventional painting training, which wasn't necessarily the modernist one that you read in the art history book, it's more sort of the amateur painting training, you tend to be asked to choose a dominant colour, a dominant type of vision. You tend to be told to steer away from those tetradic paintings because they read like children. And it's because they don't have that clear sense of mood other than this play and this joy. So I think the childlikeness of them is to do with the colour choice. I think it's deliberate to try and create an atmosphere for him and for anyone that he's gifting it to. But the childlikeness for me, and I was looking at my daughter's drawings trying to work out what a childlike drawing was. It's a drawing that lacks self-consciousness, I think, where you put the pen down, you draw the circle, and you say, there it is, right? There's no worry to it. It's like this gift of lack of self-consciousness, this gift of confidence, So I think part of this idea of getting at the childlike in painting is this idea of authenticity, but also what might it feel like to not second-guess something? Right. How do you produce something that doesn't second-guess something? And then the child is the model for that. But actually, as paintings, Miller has a really good sense of interval. He has a good sense of value. He has a good sense of the negative spaces are all very different to each other. The rhythm is very canny in that he doesn't have that sense of it all being stuck in one place. He knows how to move your eye around, right? He moves it with small marks. So they are deliberately childlike, but there's a lot of clever ways that they are actually practicing on you in a way that is not childlike, I hope that helps.
Great, thank you.
It was a long one, sorry. Yours now.
May I? I have a question for Caroline. Now, Caroline, first of all, thank you for motivating me for my presentation tomorrow, because I'm going to cite you. Now, my question to you is, you've spoken about Walter Benjamin and the counter history of modernity in relation to Brassai. Now, you spoke about, Brassai's representation of the acute, life of the man on the streets. And also you spoke about, a certain scatological representations as well. I mean, somehow it appears to me that is Brassai a kind of an extension or second generation? Does the French symbolist tradition inspire him? It seems to me that there's a resonance between the French symbolist tradition, initiated by Baudelaire, and the kind of representation that we find in Brassai.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, absolutely. I think Brassai was not shy about, he didn't create a persona for himself where he said, oh, I just picked up a camera and, I went to the streets and it happened. He came to Paris. He was very open about his artistic aspirations. He wanted to paint. He was very well read. I mean, he was an intellectual in a literary sense. Absolutely. I think they are very aware of, I don't think the Mallarmé is incidental, right? That's a little sort of link being made there deliberately. I think it's interesting how different voices in the 1930s and late 20s are trying to determine a new discourse that will somehow incorporate photography that doesn't detract from its documentary abilities, but applies a lyrical sense at the same time. And that's tricky, right? To do the two things at once. So you get a lot of different terms in circulation, the phantasmagoric, Louis Stettner talked about a humanist realism. They're all kind of playing around with how to think about this. But for sure, I think Brassai, and this is what Miller picks up on, would first and foremost say, don't call me a journalist. I'm an artist, right? And I'm an artist because I know what to look at. Oh, we have red lights. Yes,
Next, please.
we must stop now and continue outside.